West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The invitation reads, free the 16 electors poolside party. Snacks provided. Please bring drinks to share. Proceeds will be used to support the legal defense funds for the 16 Michigan electors fighting the politicized attacks from the evil AG, Dana Nessel. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel indicted those 16 Michiganders last month on felony charges for their roles in designating themselves duly elected and qualified electors for president in 2020 when they most certainly were not. They will appear in court next week. But before that, pool party, to which one might imagine Attorney General Dana Nessel is not invited. Joining us now is Michigan's top law enforcement official, Attorney General Dana Nessel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm not going to even comment on the pool party, but I will ask you about the indictment that was just released, Jack Smith special counsel's indictment, in which Michigan is a major focus. I think Michigan appears 39 times in the indictment. And I'm sure you've read it. Given the work you're doing on fake electors and that plot, do you see overlap between what is in the indictment at the federal level and what you're doing at the state level?
Well, yes, absolutely, Alex. There's overlap. A lot of the information that was in the indictment was information, obviously, that was in the January 6th report, and that was already well known to us. There were a few things here and there, I think, that were sort of newly discovered pieces of evidence that we didn't know about. But for the most part, we were operating under the same set of facts as the special prosecutor was. And to answer your question, no, I was not invited to the pool party. But I will say this, in my many years of not just being a prosecutor, but also doing criminal defense work, one of the things that I generally advise my clients is don't call the prosecutor evil. It's not ever going to be favorable for you in your case. But, you know, that's what we've come to expect now. And that's just how criminal defendants talk about their cases. But you know, it's unfortunate for the entire country, I think, as all of this plays out.
Yeah, it's a hot legal pro tip not to call the prosecutor evil. Apparently, that's gone over their heads. Let me ask about the voting machine indictment that came out yesterday. It doesn't seem like it's coincidence that some of the people who have not been charged, but nonetheless we know to have been involved in the plot to seize voting machines and run forensic tests unlawfully on them, that those people were also involved in the plot to do the very same thing in the state of Georgia. Do you think this all goes back, including the Michigan efforts, do you think this all goes back to Trump and potentially Rudy Giuliani, who oversaw a lot of that election machine interference? Yeah,
well, clearly this was a coordinated effort that started at the very top involved all of these same actors that we've been hearing about all the way throughout the course of these investigations. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that they had attorneys and many other individuals that were operating at the state levels as well. So, this is all coordinated. It truly is the definition of a legal conspiracy. And I think that, before the special prosecutor is done, whether it's federally, Jack Smith, or the special prosecutor who's working in Michigan, I think we're going to see a lot more indictments generated.
Yeah, I got to ask on that level, because we know at the state level, Fani Willis may be gearing up to indict Trump. And if in fact the Michigan plot does go all the way back to Trump, would it foreclose the possibility that the special counsel in your state might also indict Trump?
Well, I will say this, I'm not going to foreclose any possibility, and I don't know what the special prosecutor here, DJ Hilson, has planned or doesn't have planned. I will say that, one of the reasons why in the very beginning I initially referred our false slate of electors case to the federal government is because of jurisdictional related issues. And, in Michigan, I as Attorney General have statewide authority. I can charge in any county. I can execute search warrants in any county in the state of Michigan. But I'm limited. It's much more difficult when you're talking about reaching actors that operated outside of the state of Michigan. And that's true for most of the state AGs. So, that's why you really rely on the federal government to do their job, because, of course, their jurisdiction is the entire nation. Yeah, I have to ask about this because at the state level, states have been pretty clear about the malfeasance that was occurring at the state level, and sort of standing in deference to the feds to wait for that indictment. I sense that there has been some amount of frustration at the pace at which the feds have been working, and now we are running into the calendar for a campaign season. I mean, what do you make of the timeline with which the DOJ has operated in terms of issuing this indictment and completing, or at least the initial stage of its investigation? Well, I will say this, that it's inescapable that the vast majority of the evidence that we've seen in the indictment, I think, was work that was frankly done by the January 6th Commission, and perhaps prior to the special prosecutor really getting involved in any parts of that, and then running with what the J6 committee had already done. So, for me here in Michigan, I think it was just very important that as we moved along, that there was a sense that when people had committed crimes, obvious, open crimes, many of which these individuals had openly bragged about, that there was some feeling of accountability, and that when you commit certain crimes that we as prosecutors regularly charge each and every day here in the state of Michigan, that you not be treated differently because your crimes were committed in behest of this scheme to have the person of your choosing reelected as president of the United States. You're not any less culpable of these crimes because you did it for that purpose. And that was one of the messages that I think needed to be sent. If you committed these crimes, you're just as guilty as anybody else who committed similar crimes. The only difference is these crimes would have resulted in the overturning of a lawful election in which 5.5 million people voted in my state.
I want to ask on that just really quick about that question of accountability. There is some sense that at the federal level, there are options for Trump to derail all of this should he become the nominee, should he become president again in 2024, and that once again, the onus may return to the states in terms of holding people to account. Is that something you think about as this all moves forward, that if all else fails on the federal level, it will be the states in the United States of America that hold Trump and his allies to account?
Alex, quite honestly, I mean, if we get to that point where we have a situation where Donald Trump becomes president again, irrespective of all of these many different indictments, and then puts a person like, for instance, a Jeffrey Clark, in as his attorney general, we're going to have a whole lot of problems, much worse to think about than whatever the accountability is or isn't for what occurred during the 2020 election. So, my hope is that people will be properly held accountable in these current prosecutions, and that is not going to be a concern for us.
It is Thursday, the 3rd of August of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, today is arraignment day, and what a spectacle it will be, eh? I unfortunately won't be able to see it in real time because at the time that he is supposedly being arraigned, I will be dropping my mom off for her hair appointment, but that will be coming right off the heels of her doctor's appointment, a regular checkup, nothing serious or anything, just a regular checkup. And so we'll go to that, and then right after that she goes to her hair appointment, which we do on a weekly basis because it's good to get her out. It is. So I will probably be in transit. If NPR is carrying it, I'll be able to hear it, but I want to see it. Yeah. And a lot of speculation on whether we will be able to get cameras in the court or during the trial. We'll see. I'm having a feeling that in this instance they don't want us to know, because as you can tell with this oversight committee with Comer, they brought in this guy Archer, who reportedly, by the only congressperson who stayed for the whole hearing, which was Daniel Goldman, Daniel Goldman said it was a nothing burger. The guy said that Hunter called his dad. Dad said, "Hi, how are you doing?" Kind of like, how's the weather? And Comer and all the rest of them said, "It just proves how corrupt Joe Biden is." Okay. Right at the same time, we got Donald Trump whining that all this is brought to keep him from running. They only brought these spurious charges. I did everything perfect. Jesus. And then he can do this Crazy Joe Bonanno, or Crazy Joe Bananas, Joe Bonanno defense, where I absolutely believed I was the president. So he's going to claim diminished capacity, but we still got to put him back into the presidency. It makes no sense. It doesn't have to make sense because this is all about raw power, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about what the Republican Party has become. And I say become because they've been working on this for a long time. I said that they had, all these old Soviet fighters had adopted the Soviet 70-year plan. And there was a 50-year plan too, but I initially said the 70-year plan because that's the one that the Soviets really liked. Set a plan for the future, and they did. But these old Soviet fighters, I could never understand. It's like, you're working so close with a criminal that then you become the criminal? I guess. But all these old Soviet fighters had adopted the 50, 70-year Soviet plan and put their plan into effect. You got the think tanks. You got the indoctrination in the schools, right down to this crazy-ass notion that we're not a constitutional democracy. Oh, I'm sorry, a representative democracy. We're a constitutional republic. Because they can't say democracy. They can't say it. If they say it, it means that they agree with the fact that we are Democrats. Oh, no. And they put this idea in people's head, and they just work it and work it and work it. States' rights. Well, that was long before what I call the GOP 70-year plan, 50-year plan. But it worked really well for what they wanted. Worked it. So here we are. We're supposed to pretend, according to the MAGA, that nothing was wrong on January 6th. That was all just part of American democracy. They can't even say democracy, whatever it was. It's part of the American Republic. It's our right. And then just this constant harangue about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the corrupt Biden crime family. All this time, no one ever, there were some complaints about Joe Biden, let's be clear. But did we ever hear anything about, this guy being some sort of mobster? Give me a break. There was plenty of mobsters on our side that we drummed out of our party and threw in jail. We do that on our side. But Joe Biden, in the midst of what Donald Trump has done through a lifetime, what his dad did before, and his grandfather before him, we're supposed to believe that the Bidens are the crime family. Please. This is all part of that GOP Soviet 50-year, 70-year plan. The truth is at stake. It is a fight for the truth. That's actually a Nazi construct, but couple that with the Soviet 70, 50-year plan, and what do you get? A Fourth Reich? Maybe. All right. Well, we still, I don't know, I'm the eternal optimist, aren't I? We still have the mechanisms to hold them at bay. And it just means that we have to get out in even greater numbers and vote. And we have to be mad about it. And I think people are. What we saw in Kansas, what we saw in other states over Roe v. Wade, and this corrupt SCOTUS, see, that's the other thing, too. This is all part of Vlad's deal when he first came in and rose to power and took over from Yeltsin. What was the first thing he did? Take control of the emerging court system that was supposed to be set up as a fair and impartial judiciary, and turned it into his own little toy. I say toy in a sarcastic sense because he works it. So now we're going after the judiciary and have been for quite some time. First, to take it over and stack it with a bunch of Heritage Society, Federalist Society, or Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society, stormtroopers, judicial stormtroopers. And then attack the very judiciary itself because of how inept it is, and they've stacked it with their people. We need to wrest that back, and I think Joe Biden's done quite well, though we don't get to hear about it too much. We don't get to hear about the economic calamities that we have avoided because of Joe Biden. And we actually at the top of the Bistro Cafe, after the very top, with Attorney General Nessel. Right after that, we have a little story about the Fitch rating company, and we won't say any more about it, but you know what I'm talking about. In spite of the fact that we have these great successes, I guess the die is cast. They're going to work against Joe Biden and the Democratic Party at all levels, and they're going to blame Joe Biden for weaponizing government. Give me a break. We have an ongoing insurgency, and we have a bunch of American Nazi burgermeisters funding it. And now we have a rating company, Fitch, who's supposed to be unbiased. I know people say that they had to do it because of the uncertainty. Well, what was the uncertainty brought on by? Now, what Fitch might be saying is that they fear that the Republicans have even more of a chance of winning, and that's why they downgraded us. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But nothing is by coincidence anymore. And we know that, and we should not think that this is the good old days where, maybe that's just a coincidence. No, it's not. It never was, and it's not certainly now. All right, what do we have in store for you then? Since I'm itching to get into that first Bistro Cafe article. So why don't we fill you in on what we have in store for you for the rest of our time here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, at the top, yes, that was Michigan Attorney General Nessel, who says she thinks we're going to see a lot more indictments, and I think that's true. On the rest of the menu, after the success against congressional MAGA extremists holding the debt ceiling hostage, Biden aides were shocked when Fitch went ahead and downgraded the U.S. credit rating anyway. All right. Kentucky's search for a top-tier education chief will be more challenging after the political backlash experienced by the state's departing education commissioner. And that's all a feature, not a bug now. Let's be clear. And after California's record-breaking winter rains, public health officials are warning about an increased risk for valley fever this summer. Of course, in Florida, which apparently we're in competition, and when I say we, California, I'm not in California anymore, but it's hard to shake off my Californianist attitude, and that is, DeSantis says, Florida's so much better. Yeah, well, you got leprosy and a bunch of other stuff, so there. After the break, we move to the chef's table where PEPFAR, the global AIDS program targeted by U.S. religious extremists in the abortion battle, gets a new home in a State Department bureau. And the progressive political party that won the most seats in Thailand's general election has been excluded from a coalition to form the next government. See? Nice little democracy you got there. Too bad you won, because now you lose. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds our way once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help. And I know this might seem like a broken record to many of you out there. I apologize, but it must be done. Now, your patronage will really help us put a big dent in the bills that we pay every month, and we have found over these many years as being a powerhouse of resistance, that if we pay our bills, we're able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance, and thereby fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. So thank you for your generosity to those of you who have been so generous And we do take it quite seriously, though there seems to be a jocular mood around here quite a bit, eh? Anyway, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter still, and on Mastodon and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, and Blue Sky at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And you can find the links to those show notes and links on my social media feeds. And that way you can read the actual reportage. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, just not Stitcher. You know, you go over a dozen years telling people that Stitcher is where you can find podcasts, and then suddenly SiriusXM comes in and says, no, you can't. Not anymore. Thanks. But you can find us everywhere, just not on Stitcher. Alrighty. I have to get that off my chest, and I just can't. It won't leave. I don't know why. It just won't. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Oh, Jeff Stein from the Washington Post brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After a private meeting with senior Biden aides in July, analysts at Fitch Ratings sent the administration a draft report outlining their assessment of the federal government's credit and asking for correction and notes, according to a Treasury Department official. The draft did not say whether the ratings agency would downgrade U.S. credit, and Biden aides were optimistic that their successful handling of a debt ceiling standoff, you know, when the Republicans held our debt ceiling hostage, the good faith and credit of the United States of America was held hostage by the Republicans. It was a standoff. Meant that would not happen, meaning the downgrade. So the officials were shocked when Fitch announced the downgrade anyway, ignoring objections raised by senior Treasury officials in the 2 weeks before the final decision. Senior White House officials, including Treasury Secretary Yellen, National Economic Council Director Lael Brainerd, and Council of Economic Advisors Chair Jared Bernstein, spent Tuesday coordinating the administration's response, which involved striking back at the ratings agency as soon as its analysis was released. Yet, while it caught the White House by surprise, the decision to downgrade U.S. government debt after a spring showdown reflects Washington's persistent battles over rising federal debt, now projected to approach levels unseen since the end of World War II. Well, you know, if we weren't at battle, or should we just say war, with the supposed loyal opposition, we wouldn't be here, would we? Fitch's warnings, echoed by numerous nonpartisan forecasters, found that the national debt has soared and shows no signs of slowing. Well, how about wresting back those stupid tax cuts that 125 people got? And it tanked our economy because of it? Why don't we take that back a little bit? Nah, we won't. In justifying its downgrade ratings, the agency highlighted tax cuts and spending increases over the last several decades. Tax cuts. And argued that it is unlikely Congress will act to rein in debt before the 2024 presidential election, meaning we have a recalcitrant party that's going to throw up every roadblock to tank the economy because they think that will be a winning message when they go to the election. The rising debt tide may pose a political challenge for President Biden, who has repeatedly touted the decline in the deficit since Trump left office, but still faces a large debt burden, and that is expected to grow. Inflation under Biden has eroded the debt as a percentage of the economy. Remember when it was really price gouging? that caused this? You know, when I talk about American burgermeisters funding a lot of this turn in our politics, this turn in our country, this is what I'm talking about. Blame inflation on Joe Biden when it's the American burgermeisters price gouging. Many experts say long-term debts, now more than $31 trillion, also loom as a threat to U.S. fiscal health. It remains especially unclear how Congress will resolve funding crises for Social Security and Medicare. I don't know. Wait. I hate to tell the Washington Post writer here, we already have a mechanism for that. Senior officials with the Treasury, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Council of Economic Advisors met with Fitch in April and then had a follow-up meeting in July. After receiving the draft report, senior Treasury officials, led by Nellie Liang, Josh Frost, and Eric Van Noordstrand, pushed back hard on a potential downgrade, hammering the agency for only now updating its methodology to reflect a drop in its assessment of U.S. governance that occurred while Trump was president, but that has improved under Biden. In a statement on Tuesday announcing the decision, Fitch cited both U.S. political dysfunction and the rising debt burden as reasons to doubt the government's ability to repay all its bills, bringing the rating from AAA to AA+. Fitch pointed to repeated debt limit standoffs and last-minute resolutions. Well, it looks like even though we beat the Republicans at their game, the American burgermeister said, "Hold on now. Let's go back to the replay." Bruce Schreiner of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Kentucky's search for a top-tier education chief will be more challenging after the political backlash experienced by the state's departing education commissioner, Governor Andy Beshear, said yesterday, Wednesday. Education Commissioner Jason Glass came under steady criticism from prominent Republicans over transgender policies in schools. Glass, a third-generation Kentucky educator, said on Monday he will step down on September 29th to become an associate vice president of teaching and learning at Western Michigan University. The Kentucky Board of Education plans to meet later this month to determine the next steps and a timeline for moving forward with an interim commissioner once Glass leaves. Beshear said the circumstances of Glass's departure make the search for a permanent successor more difficult. The education commissioner oversees the state's K-12 school system and its 635,000 students.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Summer Lynn of the Los Angeles Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After California's record-breaking winter rains, public health officials are warning about an increased risk for valley fever this summer. California's dry conditions, combined with recent heavy winter rains, could result in increasing valley fever cases in the coming months. California Department Public Health Director Dr. Tomas Aragon said in a news release, "During a drought, the fungus that causes valley fever often is less active, but it grows once the rains return." And valley fever cases have been lowest during drought and highest in the years immediately following a drought, raising concerns for this summer and fall after the record-breaking rain that hit California. Valley fever, also known as, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's short, they have shortened it to kochi, is caused by a fungus that grows in dirt. People and animals can get sick if they breathe in the dust that contains the fungus. It typically affects the lungs, resulting in symptoms including chest pain, cough, fever, and fatigue. Symptoms can last for a month or more. Since the symptoms overlap with other respiratory illnesses, included COVID-19, lab tests can sometimes be needed to determine whether the infection is valley fever. People who test negative for COVID-19 but continue to experience symptoms for more than a week should speak with a doctor. About 20,000 cases are reported every year in the U.S., primarily in California and Arizona. Rates are highest in the Central Coast and Central Valley regions, including Kern, Kings, San Luis Obispo, Fresno, Tulare, Madera, and Monterey counties. More cases have been reported in the northern San Joaquin Valley and Southern California over the last few years. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, this is Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
We highlight the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind.
And we break down the medical research to help you stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We're Scientific American's senior health editors.
On today's show, we're talking about an unexpected effect of popular drugs that cause weight loss, like Ozempic and Wegovy, and how they could help people struggling with addiction.
If you watch TV, there's a pretty good chance you'll see advertisements for a nifty regular injection that will help you shed pounds with ease.
That drug, Ozempic, started in the U.S. to help treat diabetes. It got approval for that in 2017.
Right, but over the past couple of years, the drug took off for another reason. TikTok and social media influencers began sharing how they use the drug to lose weight. Ozempic, along with its sister brand designed specifically for weight loss called Wegovy, has since become one of the hottest ways to burn off weight.
Now, other companies are working to pump out similar medications, I've heard. Eli Lilly, for example, is currently developing a weight loss drug candidate with the nickname Triple G.
These drugs generally work by controlling appetite. They help people eat less. But recently, people taking the drugs have been noticing another welcome side effect in addition to weight loss. Their desire for addictive substances waned as well.
Wait, you mean things like cigarettes and booze? That's wild.
Yeah, I know, right? And gambling, too. Same with compulsive behaviors like skin picking. More and more people say that they no longer have the urge to do these things. These anecdotal reports have left researchers wondering whether these new weight loss drugs can serve as the basis for addiction treatments. Our colleague Lauren Young, an associate health editor at SciAm, recently edited a story about this by our contributor Sarah Reardon. Lauren is here to talk about what we're learning about weight loss drugs and addiction. Lauren, welcome back to Your Health Quickly.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Hey, Lauren.
So, Lauren, tell us how researchers first started looking into these drugs for addiction treatment.
Yeah, so the connection between these weight loss drugs and addiction has been an ongoing question for researchers for quite some time. And that's because the drugs target a biological pathway that seems to affect both appetite and pleasure. So when you eat food, your pancreas produces a hormone called GLP-1. And as you eat, GLP-1 levels increase, eventually signaling to the rest of your body that you're full. This also reduces your craving for food. But in some people with obesity or diabetes, GLP-1 levels can get disrupted, which causes the body to consume more food than it needs instead of recognizing that it's full.
Okay, I admit I'm a little confused here, Lauren. Drugs like Ozempic make you eat less, not more. So do they mess around with your GLP-1 levels? And when they do that, do they raise them or do they lower them?
Yeah, so they raise them. It works a little like this. Ozempic and Wegovy, which were both developed by the company Novo Nordisk, are brands of one specific drug called semaglutide. Semaglutide is a type of GLP-1 agonist, which means that it binds to and activates specific receptors in the body. In this case, semaglutide is triggering GLP-1 receptors in the pancreas, causing the organ to pump out more of the hormone.
So you don't get food cravings.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Scientists also know that GLP-1 seems to affect the brain's reward pathways by lowering levels of dopamine, that feel-good hormone that makes eating food feel pleasurable. And those reward pathways and dopamine also play a major role in addiction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, GLP-1 makes you want to stop eating and put the fork down. But do we know anything about the mechanism behind addiction to things like nicotine and how these drugs might work to tackle that?
So understanding addiction, that's where things get a little messy. Here's what some researchers have been theorizing, though. Addictive substances such as nicotine and opioids are generally thought to take over the brain's natural reward pathways. So continuously using such drugs causes the brain to need more and more dopamine to function, and that leads to addiction. There are also other explanations on the table. Some addiction researchers think that substance use may be driven by both pleasurable rewards and by fear of the negative emotions and physical side effects of withdrawal.
So in their theory, the brain sees a substance like nicotine as an essential physiological need, similar to our basic need for food.
Yeah, that's right. And researchers suspect that GLP-1 agonists such as semaglutide might short-circuit that association.
That's really fascinating. So how well do they work?
Well, various research groups are actually currently working on human trials to answer that question. In 2022, a research group completed the largest trial in humans so far using exenatide, another GLP-1 agonist drug. The researchers found that people with alcohol use disorder who took exenatide had less activity in the brain's reward centers when they were shown pictures of alcohol, which is an indication that they craved it less. But only study participants with obesity ended up drinking significantly less than their peers who received a placebo.
That's a little weird. Why would obesity have anything at all to do with actual drinking in the study?
Yeah, it's a great question, and researchers aren't quite sure yet. It's unclear why the study found that the drug only lowered alcohol consumption in people with obesity. But it could suggest that these anecdotal reports we're hearing of addiction disappearing could be skewed because many people who are prescribed a GLP-1 agonist are often overweight to begin with.
So what you're saying is that it's possible that these drugs might not work the same way for everyone, huh?
Yeah, and the research group that led the original study is planning a follow-up clinical trial to tackle this question about weight. Other researchers are also running studies on GLP-1 agonists and addiction. For instance, researchers at Penn State University are running a clinical trial in people receiving treatment for opioid use disorder, while scientists at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill are testing semaglutide in people with alcohol and nicotine addictions. If those results are promising, these experts are hoping that GLP-1 agonist drugs can one day give clinicians and patients another addiction treatment option.
That would be great if it pans out. But as these drugs are used more widely for a bunch of different purposes, I wanted to ask how safe they are. Are there any concerns about the safety or side effects of these drugs?
Yeah, and researchers are concerned about that too. They want to make sure that these drugs would be safe for people with certain types of addiction or health conditions. So we know that GLP-1 agonists have been proven safe for most people, but experts are concerned that they could cause problems in people who are malnourished from opioid or methamphetamine use, for instance. Another concern is that GLP-1 agonists might be too good at dampening the pleasure and reward pathways to the point where they would cause disruptions in mood or motivation.
That's an interesting question. And I know that drugs like Ozempic can have side effects such as nausea and vomiting that can cause users to stop taking them. And I doubt that would be good for people who need to stay on treatment for addiction.
Definitely. There are also a lot of questions about whether or not a GLP-1 agonist would be a lifelong addiction treatment. For instance, Ozempic helps manage diabetes, but people need to take it for the rest of their lives. And people who take semaglutide, like Wegovy, for weight loss often regain the pounds if they stop taking the medication.
Yeah, that seems to be a common problem. So, would people with substance use disorder also need to be on it for life?
We don't know, but ideally, the GLP-1 agonist would be used as a short-term treatment that curbs addiction long enough for people to make lifestyle changes that help them stay sober.
What else needs to happen for these new addiction treatments to become a reality, Lauren?
Yeah, even after more human trials, there's still a long way to go. The Food and Drug Administration hasn't approved GLP-1 agonists to be used for addiction. Our contributor, Sarah Reardon, also reached out to Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. They said they're not currently running or planning trials to investigate addiction. They're staying focused on diabetes and weight loss, for now.
Thanks for catching us up, Lauren.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me.
So you can read more about the ongoing clinical trials on weight loss drugs and addiction in Sarah's article at scientificamerican.com.
Your Health Quickly is produced by Talika Bose, Jeff Delvicio, Kelso Harper, Corinne Leong, and by us. It's edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, give us a rating or review. And if you have ideas for topics we should cover, send us an email at yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. That's yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The framers of the Constitution intended to place the balance of power in the hands of Congress. This reflects their focus upon the ultimate importance of a lawmaking institution composed of representatives of the people, embodying the principle of popular sovereignty. Evidence of their intent to create a predominant Congress is apparent in their giving Congress the power to impeach the president and other high officials in the other branches of the national government. This power was not delegated to the executive and judicial branches, although the Chief Justice of the United States presides over impeachment trials. The impeachment power delegated to Congress was intended to address the framers' concern that a strong executive would be able to increase its powers, violate the limits placed upon those powers, and transform a republic into a despotic tyranny. This fear was based not only upon the framers' extensive knowledge of the history of political systems, but also on their first-hand experience of what they considered to be the tyrannical rule of the colonial governors appointed by the British king. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day that became known in California as the Wheatland Riot. The industrial workers of the world, or Wobblies, were trying to organize hop pickers who worked near the city of Wheatland in Northern California. Living conditions for the hop pickers were rough. Durst Ranch was the largest agricultural employer in the state, hiring hundreds of seasonal farm workers each summer. The Durst workers slept in tents. The bathrooms were latrine ditches dug into the ground. The well water they drank was contaminated and foul. The Northern California heat was excruciating, with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees. And while the temperatures were high, the wages were unbearably low. On this fateful day, thousands of workers gathered to hear IWW organizer Richard Ford talk about calling a strike. In response, the local sheriff formed a posse to arrest Ford. During the arrest, one of the posse shot his gun into the air to disperse the crowd. Chaos erupted. Gunfire was exchanged. 4 people lay dead, including the district attorney, a deputy sheriff, a worker, and a young boy. Authorities blamed the IWW for the violence. Ford stood trial for causing the riot even though he had fired no shots. Another Wobbly organizer, who was not even there that day, was also tried for the events at Wheatland. Both received sentences of life in prison for second-degree murder. Today, an historic marker commemorates the site. It explains that the event, quote, focused public opinion for the first time on the plight of California's agricultural laborers and resulted in new state legislation to regulate labor camp conditions. A new state commission on immigration and housing was created to improve working conditions. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 90s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, with sunny conditions throughout the day, clear skies overnight, with lows in the low 60s, not nearly cool enough. We need it cooler, please. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then sunny tomorrow with highs nearly the same as today in the low 90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated moderate here in our little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 18 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is very high at level 8, so take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.09 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 62%, drying out as we go further in the day. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. And we do indeed have weather from around the world today, and we have even added a few cities to round out around the world. London is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 63 degrees with rain and a thunderstorm advisory. Rome is 91 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kabul is 78 and clear. Kyiv is 82 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 85 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 83 and clear. Melbourne, Australia, is 62 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 56, mostly cloudy, with a small craft advisory on the bay for heavy wind and choppy waters. Chicago, Illinois is 78 and fair, and New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Ellen Nickmeyer of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The State Department launched a new bureau aimed at making the battle against global outbreaks a lasting priority of U.S. foreign policy, even as one of its key elements. A widely acclaimed HIV program has become caught up in a political battle over abortion. The Bureau is to include the 20-year-old initiative known as the President's Emergency Program for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. The program is relatively unknown to Americans, but has succeeded beyond most early expectations in addressing the AIDS crisis, and is credited with saving up to 25 million lives worldwide. The Bureau will be led by a public health official integral to PEPFAR, John N. Kengasong. Born in Cameroon, Kengasong was a founder of U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention Operations in Africa. He helped set up some of the sub-Saharan's first sophisticated labs for work with HIV and AIDS. President George W. Bush started PEPFAR in Africa in 2003. The program retains bipartisan support, but anti-abortion groups and some House Republicans, including Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey, are pushing to attach abortion-related limits on U.S. health support overseas to the reauthorizing legislation. They are also seeking yearly votes on PEPFAR's continuance. While the Democratic-controlled Senate is expected to quash any such GOP conditions on the HIV program, the skirmish signals the PEPFAR program is now likely a captive of U.S. abortion politics going forward, which makes one wonder, why are we negotiating with terrorists?
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jitimus Saxornchai of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The progressive political party that won the most seats in Thailand's general election has been excluded from a coalition to form the next government, its former ally said yesterday, Wednesday. Conservative lawmakers strongly oppose the party over its proposed reform of a law banning criticism of the country's monarchy. Thailand has struggled for nearly 3 months to form a government and select a new leader since its election in May. Move Forward Party, the surprise winner, pulled together an 8-party coalition with 312 seats in the 500-member House. However, under the military-enacted Constitution, confirming a new prime minister requires a majority vote by both the elected House and the 250-member Senate, which was appointed by a previous military government. An initial bid last month by the Move Forward leader fell short by more than 50 votes, largely because only 13 senators backed him. His second attempt the following week was blocked by a procedural vote in Parliament, which said his name could not be nominated again. How convenient. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcast on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Friday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.